Okay, so this is people have been asking for a bit more economics, so I thought I would do a video that really explains the underlying causes of basically the collapse in living standards that's occurred in Britain. There's obviously other things that we can talk about later on, like deindustrialisation, the impacts of immigration, etc. But I think there's some even more deep-seated fundamentals to understand. So I'm going to explain those today. Right, so the first thing to understand is something called the basic economic problem. And it's the idea that human wants are almost limitless. You know, if I was to say to one of you guys, would you like a sports car? Would you like a saloon car, when you go shopping? You know, but most people, if you just look at, like, I don't know, Premier League footballers, whatever, if money was no object, most people prefer more to less. And that's just basic human nature. There'll be some people that say, oh, I'm not like that. But if you look at human beings in aggregate, most people, I think, do conform fairly well to the idea of unlimited human wants. Think about foreign holidays, So I don't think that's too far of a stretch. So the next thing to understand is that you need resources to produce the goods and services that us lot want in near unlimited quantities. And economists, they talk about factors of production, and those are things that you need to produce goods and services. And they're land, labour, capital, and then the final one is like an entrepreneur to organise it all. So those are finite. So in the case of cars, you need steel to produce a car, and the amount of iron ore on the planet is limited. So in the short run, the amount of labour available is also limited because it takes time to change a country's workforce naturally, organically, without migration. And then also there's time lags in terms of education and training as well. So in the short run, even labour is fairly fixed as a factor of production. So you've got this problem then. On the one hand, you've got unlimited wants, and then you've got finite resources available to produce those goods and services. So in economics, it's really about choice. How are we going to overcome this problem of unlimited wants, finite resources? And all economies have got three big questions to answer, all societies, I guess. And that is, what things are we going to produce? So you could look at, the UK at the moment. Are we going to have more accommodation for migrants that come over on rubber dinghies, or are we going to provide more education, or are we going to provide more organic meat? And the idea here is that we can't produce more of everything simultaneously because we've got this problem of scarcity. So we have to make choices. And if we choose to do one thing, that often means sacrificing the ability to do something else. And that's what economists call opportunity cost. It's the highest valued for gone alternative of a decision that you've made. And it applies to individuals as well. So tonight I'm going to have a chat with Nick Hay from Hayes Reviews. So what's the opportunity cost to me of that decision? Well, it's the next most valuable thing that I could end up doing with that time that I'm going to spend talking with Nick. So it might be, I don't know, talking with my wife, or it might be, I don't know, going for a run or something like that. So countries also encounter opportunity costs. If we do one thing, that means the resources used to achieve that objective, I don't know, it might be a high-speed rail line, can't be used for something else. So that's the first thing that we've got to get our heads around, is that we can't have more of everything simultaneously because of finite resources. So all societies have got to decide what things they're going to produce and in what quantities, because we can't produce more of what everybody conceivably might want all at the same time because of resource scarcity. The next decision that's got to be made is how are we going to produce the products that we've decided to produce. So, at its simplest, you might think about, well, are we going to go for a labour intensive method of production that might maximise jobs? Or are we going to go for a capital intensive method of production using lots of machinery? That's what capital actually means in economics. So it's a term that's misused by normies and the mainstream media. You know, most people, when you talk about capital, they automatically think about money. But in economics, capital is actually machinery that's used to produce goods and services. So for a hairdresser, an example of capital might be just a pair of scissors. For, I don't know, TUI, Thomson Holidays, capital might be an aeroplane. So yeah, we've got to decide which methods of production that we're gonna use to produce the products that society's decided to produce. And then the last question. So we've decided what we're going to produce and in what quantities. We've decided the production methods. The last question is for whom. So which people in society are going to have the opportunity to consume the limited quantities of goods and services that we've decided to make, and which people are going to go without. So I don't know, you might look at Ferrari sports cars or something like that. So the supply of them is fairly limited in relation to the number of people who might want to drive around in a Ferrari. So how do we solve that scarcity question of picking winners? Which people are going to be able to consume and who is going to go without? So that's, one more time, that's actually what's called the basic economic problem. So what to produce, how to produce, and for whom. So how do societies solve the basic economic problem? There's two main methods and a third one which you could call really just a halfway house. So the first method is what's called the free market. Now, or some people might call it free market capitalism. Now, for most people, they won't know about this at all because you've never experienced it. You might have been told that you've experienced it, and you might have been told that all of your problems that you're currently suffering from are all result of like liberalism and free markets, and it's a failure of capitalism and all of that. If you listen to that Gary's Economics, or you know what the establishment's line is, they at the moment they just love to blame it all on it's the failure of capitalism and free markets. So how does this free market economy like work? Well, basically in a free market there's two characteristics. So everything's privately owned. So you have production is organized by entrepreneurs who are motivated by profit. And basically in a pure free market economy, we're not told by government what we can and can't consume. We make our own decisions. And basically what happens, the easiest way to explain how the basic economic problem is solved by the free market is, well, let's just go through the questions one by one. So the first one is like what to produce. So in a free market, that's decided by a daily economic election. So each of us casts spending votes in a daily economic election, and we buy the stuff that we like. And basically, if we want more of something, more spending votes are cast in the direction of that good or service. The price goes up, and as the price goes up, it becomes more profitable to supply. So as a result of that, more entrepreneurs will want to get into that market and start producing the thing that's gone up in price. Not because that they want to sleep well at night, it's just primarily because they can make more profit by doing that. And obviously the same applies to entrepreneurs who are already operating in that market. They'll increase the production of products that we want because those will be going up in price. They'll be like bid up, like imagine a giant auction, it's similar to that. And they'll make more profit. So of course that incentivizes them into producing more of what we want. And of course it works the opposite way too. If a certain product falls out of fashion, maybe like vegan food, in a pure free market where there's no government intervention, the price of vegan food will drop. It'll become less profitable to survive. Sorry, I don't mean that. It'll become less profitable to produce. So therefore, firms will exit the market. And if it becomes unprofitable because hardly anybody is buying that stuff, and the revenue generated by those businesses is pathetic because not many people want to buy vegan food, then these companies will make a loss. They won't be able to cover their revenues, cover their costs with their revenues, and they go bust. Now, again, as a free market economist, you say, well, that's a good thing, right? Because factors of production, land, labour, capital, and the entrepreneur, they're scarce, and we must make sure that those are being used wisely to produce things of value that we, the people, have deemed to be what we want. So the whole thing about the free market then is that it's highly decentralized. So the government isn't deciding what type of products are going to be produced and what's not going to be produced. We the consumers, millions of us, decide what's going to be produced. And if we change our mind, the price mechanism will shift. Prices of the things that we want more of will go up. Prices of the things that we want less of will go down. Profits will change accordingly, and that will motivate entrepreneurs to adjust their output mix to produce more of the stuff that we want, less of the stuff that we don't want. So it's a self-correcting, self-adjusting process. Now, we don't have this, right? It's like self-evident that we don't have this. Why? Well, we've got regulation, like forcing firms to produce a certain product. We've also got price controls, price caps. So we don't have anything like a free market. And this is a major problem. What we have instead is what I call, like, rather than consumer sovereignty, we have what's called government sovereignty. It's the government that's deciding which things that we're going to produce and which things that we're going to consume and in what quantities. Second question, how to produce. So in a free market economy, again, the government doesn't tell private firms, about production methods. They don't try to nudge firms using regulations like green regulations and stuff like that. Instead, what firms do is that they choose the most profitable method of production, right? So does that always mean choosing the cheapest method of production? No. Again, this will fry the people who've been programmed in Marxism. Like, you might choose the cheapest method of production and go bust. Like, why? Well, the cheapest method of production might produce a lousy product that consumers don't want, and of their own free will, consumers won't buy their product, because that's what happens in a free market society. We decide what we will and what we won't consume. Now, obviously, at the moment, we don't have that, do we? Because we've got every passing year, we've got more and more government regulation of private business, and then. The final question is for whom? So in a free market society, a society that's free, where private individuals can choose to do what they want to do with their lives, like work-wise, whether they want to be an entrepreneur, whether they want to work for somebody else, what things they want to consume with their incomes. Everything's decided by your ability to pay. So again, like, the Marxists will be going like, oh, no, that's really bad, right? Because we need equality of outcome. Everybody's got to have the same income, right? So that means if everyone has the same income, then everybody will be able to have their fair share of the country's output. So to those people, what I say is, well, like, imagine that you're working with somebody and, you get there 5 minutes early for your working day. Every day you work really hard, and you try your very best. When you're interacting with customers, you're really polite, and then you're working with somebody else who's constantly having sickies. They're constantly late, they're constantly going home early. Why should, and they're lazy and they're stupid, they're rude with customers. Why should they receive the same income as you? Yeah. So in a free market society, the lazy, stupid, rude employee gets fired. They certainly don't get promotions and pay rises. So this actually incentivizes people to be less selfish. And this is something that socialists don't understand, because most socialists, in my opinion, are selfish. What they think is that because they can fog a mirror and they can breathe in and out. They deserve to consume a share of other people's output. But in a free market economy, it's not like that at all. Unless you're prepared to serve your fellow man or woman by being either an employee for somebody else, or maybe better still, by being an entrepreneur, you don't automatically get a share of somebody else's output that they've produced, because there's no government stealing other people's income through taxes, so that it can be transferred to somebody else who didn't contribute anything to society, who's kind of selfish, stupid, greedy, and they want something for nothing. And this is basically what's been happening over over most of my lifetime, is that, the welfare state model, the big government model, it's appealed to lazy and stupid people who think that they've got a divine right to consume a share of somebody else's output, who think that they've got a divine right to consume a share of society's output without them having to contribute anything in return. So that's the free market economy. The next type of economy is the type of economy that we've been moving rapidly towards, which is in modern terms, they call it technocracy. If you look at older books, they'll talk about the centrally planned economy. And in this case, the three basic questions of what to produce, how to produce, and for whom, they're all decided by the government. And technocracies, they can either be right-wing technocracies or left-wing technocracies. So an example of a right-wing technocracy would be fascism. So in a fascist technocracy, you might actually have private ownership. So, in Nazi Germany, there was private ownership. I don't know, like Messerschmitt or something was a privately owned company. Same would be true in Mussolini's Italy. Quite a lot of private ownership. So some people would be going, oh, well, that means it's free market then. No, because in a fascist technocracy, the government tells privately owned businesses what they can and can't produce. So the first question of the basic economic problem, like what to produce, is decided by technocrats. In Nazi Germany, it was the Thord Institute. They decided whether Messerschmitts were going to be produced or Focke-Wulfs. It was the government that decided what was going to be produced through regulations, diktats, orders. And this is the type of system that Klaus Schwab dreams of imposing on us. So, yeah, you have private corporations, but those private corporations basically do what they're told to do, especially the smaller ones. If they don't, well, then the state will just regulate them out of the market. They'll put them out of business. Rochdale Council behaves like a mini technocracy. How to produce? Obviously, in a technocracy, it's the government that decides on the production methods. So you can see that already in the UK, and across the EU as well. It's the technocrats, the central planners, the bureaucrats telling farmers about the farming methods that they can and can't use. So these decisions aren't being made in the free market anymore. So like the morons, the Marxists, the people who've been programmed into Marxism, who think that, all the things going wrong at the moment is all down to a failure of capitalism. They're stupid. They've just been completely brainwashed, because what's going on now is a product of technocracy, not free markets. It's not farmers themselves that are choosing to go with inefficient green methods of production or producing products that people don't want to buy. It's the government telling them that they must produce, biodiesel with their land. That's not a decision that's been made in the free market. That's a decision that's been made in the upper reaches of government. So the problem is government. The problem is not free markets, because we have big government. We don't have free markets. So you can't blame a problem on something that doesn't exist. So we don't have free market economics. And then the final one is for whom. So in a technocracy, fascist technocracy, it was the government that basically they stole all the Jews' products that they were producing. They stole their businesses, they stole their property, and they redistributed them. So the tiny German mustache man didn't talk about. I'm not sure if he talked about social justice, but what he was actually doing was very, very similar to what modern day socialists believe is right, which is what we should do is take from the rich and give to people that we deem to be oppressed. So again, this Gary's economics. I'll do a whole video about this dude because he's controlled opposition 100%. Is that they want to try and encourage us to go for more of maybe a national socialist style technocracy. So he's constantly banging on about redistribution of income, which is basically a very polite term for stealing stuff. So living in a society where there's no private property rights and the state can just dip into your pocket whenever they want. And if you object to it, then they go and lock you up. The other type of technocracy is obviously the left-wing variety. So we're talking about communism there. So the main difference between a fascist technocracy and a communist technocracy is ownership. So fascist technocracy, you've got private ownership, but you still have total state control. A communist technocracy, you've got the government owning all businesses, and obviously still this total government control there. So the common factor then between a right-wing and a left-wing technocracy is total government control. That's present in all technocracies. So the third way of solving the basic economic problem is what's called the mixed economy. So it's a combination of the free market and a combination of central planning technocracy, whatever you want to call it. So during my lifetime, theoretically, if you talk to some people, they say, well, we really live in a mixed economy, 45 pence in every pound created in the economy is spent by the government. But what I would say is that it's actually worse than that, because in the private sector at the moment, 55% of the economy, it's not really a proper private sector because there's so much intervention, in terms of regulation. It's not, entrepreneurs have got their hands tied behind their backs by the government and they're being taxed to death, and they're only able to survive if they dance to the tune of the technocrats. So what's been going wrong then? Well, obviously if the government is deciding what's going to be produced, then don't expect our scarce resources to be used to produce things that you want. What you're going to get is things that the technocrats want. So look, you can see this straight off. Do you want your country's scarce factors of production to be used to produce edible food and housing for young people? Or would you rather your factors of production being used to fund the production of arms and killing people in foreign countries? And then also, you've got all of the production of, let's call them sheep dips to reduce the number of people living in your own country. So we're actually living in a society at the moment where more and more it's the government that's deciding what to be produced. They decide what's going to be produced. They don't really care about us. They produce what they want, which is usually quite different from what we want. And for the people that sort of say, oh, well, maybe the solution is we need to elect a new government, a bit like some honest politicians. Well, I would just say, look at the type of people that want to become politicians. These are the suck-uppers and the brown nosers that you knew at school. And basically what they're into is their own ego, status and power. So as Ludwig von Mises said, the famous Austrian school economist, the type of person that's attracted into politics is the type of person that we would least want in that position. So he said it something like, those who are unfit to serve us seek to rule over us. So, like, even if you had a politician who was like a, I don't know, like a saint or something, who really did care about the people, they wouldn't be able to know our individual tastes and preferences, because we're all different, we're all unique, the only example of us that's ever existed. So how could a politician at the top of a central planning agency possibly know what I don't know, 55 million people might want? Because they all want slightly different things. So this was you could see this in somewhere like, in the Soviet Union, that they had no idea what people wanted. They were hopeless at second guessing what the population might want, if they even tried to do that, which I doubt. So you just get loads of scarce resources being used to produce things that are not wanted by the people. So Mises called that the socialist economic problem, but it basically occurs, the socialist calculation problem. It basically also occurs in fascist economies too. Just the central planners can't possibly know our own tastes and preferences better than we do ourselves. So the smart thing to do is to run a free market economy, incentivize each and every one of us to serve each other, and that means by producing things of value that other people want. Yeah, and then allow us to spend the money that we've earned on the things that we want. So again, for me, when I was living in England, I used to go and watch Morecambe play football from Guildford. So I used to go all the way up to Morecambe and watch football. I'm sure there'll be behavioural economists who'd say that's irrational. But, how dare they just judge my subjective tastes and preferences as being irrational? This is what central planners do. Let people decide how they want to spend the money that they've earned honestly by helping other people, right? And the other thing that I've not mentioned about a free market economy is that there's zero coercion. Like, no one forced me to go and buy a match day ticket to go and watch Morecambe. I did so of my own free will. It's not like, like when the government tries to sell you, Britney Spears and the Boosters concert tickets. That's basically technocracy. The other problem that we've got is for far too long now, the government's been deciding on production methods indirectly through taxes, subsidies, regulations that manipulate that decision. So we don't really have any, what I would call, real market prices that have come as a product of a daily economic election, because we've had too many. The government's casting fake spending votes through subsidies and confiscating votes in other markets through taxation. So we don't have real market prices. So this makes it impossible for entrepreneurs to calculate the most efficient method of production. Yeah, because we don't have real market prices to calculate costs with. So just as an example, imagine that you wanted to build a railway line between point A and point B, right? And there's two ways of going there. Like, one way, the most direct way, might involve having to build a tunnel through a mountain. The other way might be going a less direct route, so avoiding the need to tunnel, but then you'd need more steel. So which is the most efficient route, the direct route or the roundabout route? Right, so to calculate that, you would need to have knowledge of the price of steel versus the price of dynamite, right? And if you've got if you've got false prices that have been produced by central planners, technocrats, you can't do that. What you need is real organic prices that are being created in this decentralized process of people casting spending votes in a daily economic election. Final thing we've got as a problem is you can see loads of people giving up. Those of you of a certain age will remember the Tetley Bittermen advert from the 1970s. If you can't beat them, join them, right? And this is what's been happening, that people, we've had politicians, like, just check this out, right? At the moment, 45 pence in every pound spent in Britain, and that's the official figures. The real figures is a lot higher than that, is spent by the government, right? So basically people have been taxed to death. As I say, for me as a teacher, I had 40% marginal rate of income tax, another 10% national insurance. So again, this is another thing. You've got a lot of people going, oh, well, taxes in Scandinavia, like Sweden, Norway, oh, they're miles higher, Denmark, than they are in Britain. And they'll just look at income tax in isolation. But, in Britain, you have to add 10% onto that because you've got this national insurance, which is just income tax by another name. And like Dumbos just fall for this kind of nonsense. So basically what's happening is that people that are inclined, people who are not selfish, people who are interested in serving their fellow men and women, people who get up out of bed and do things of value as judged by other people, they're being screwed over by the state, who steals their money via the tax system and then redistributes it to kind of like lazy stay-at-home people or people that have come across to the UK on rubber boats. So what are people going to do? Well, they're going to do what's happened, aren't they? They're just going to give up. If you can't beat them, join them. Why should I be mugged off, working long hours, paying loads of money in tax, adding the VAT, 20% on virtually everything you spend, excise duty, which is, whatever it is, 80 pence or something on a litre of petrol. I don't know, 10 quid on a bottle of whiskey or something. Then you've got council tax on top, which just keeps on going up and up and up. So people just react to those incentives by giving up, don't they? It's people don't like being mugged off. So this is why your country is getting poorer and poorer and poorer and poorer. Then on top of that, in the labour market, in a free market, if you're useless, like no one really cares about your skin colour, right? In a free market. Just think about Premier League football for that. Does racism exist in Premier League football? No, it doesn't. Why is that? Oh, well, basically football clubs will hire the best people for the jobs. And that's basically what happens in the rest of the economy, or it should do in a free market. Yeah? But what we have now is like, government regulations, banks also saying to firms, if you don't go down the diversity, equity, inclusion route, we'll pull your overdraft, which is basically the banks are like working for the same people that the government works for. So what we've got is we've got people in jobs that can't do the jobs that they've been hired to do, and they're there because of their kind of, I don't know, their gender, their skin colour. This is why things are collapsing, right? And this is why, like, a lot of the, competent people, they just like give up. It's like, well, why should I work when the government's just going to steal my money and give it to people that I don't like? So this is basically what's been going wrong. Another classic one would be tax credits, So, like, why work full time when you can pop out a couple of kids and work part time and get the same money? Because the government will top up your part-time wages and make it as though you're working full-time with tax credits. So this basically is what has been going wrong. What's the solution? We just need to just get rid of the state, just completely wipe it out. The only legitimate role, the only moral role for the state is a provision of law and order and national defence, and that is it, right? So if you got rid of the November Hotel Sierra, and you had and you also got rid of any government regulation of private health providers, you would get an awful, you get this really weird situation of doctors and hospitals actually having an incentive to do a good job, right? Because that's the best way, your reputation would be everything. You'd also have an incentive for doctors to look for new ways of treating old diseases for reasons of self-interest. You would also have a very strong incentive for incompetent doctors to get their acts together or go and do something else with their lives, because no one of their own free will, in a market where there's competition, right? So you have to get rid of those government regulations to do that. People are just going to go to the doctors that are competent, that can do their jobs properly. But one more time, it's not like the American system, right? Because the American system is like a fascist system in that you've got private ownership, but it's still basically run by the government. There's way too many regulations. that stop new entrants from coming in. There's still regulations regarding what doctors can and can't do. So it's more like a fascist technocracy. You know, imagine what you would do in education, get rid of like state schools. So you'd have a lot of dynamism in that market and different types of schools. Like vocational education would improve beyond all recognition because consumers would demand it. You know, private education providers that were not very good in a free competitive market without any government regulation would go bust. You know, think about, you would hardly need to collect any tax. Maybe, I don't know, an income tax rate of 2%, or maybe a flat rate of tax like a poll tax, I don't know, a couple of £100 a year. That would be enough to pay for law and order, and that's it. Right, so imagine like what type of people might be attracted to Britain, you know, where you had a flat rate of tax of, I don't know, £200 a year. Yeah, Britain would be very appealing to immigrants, but it wouldn't be appealing to the same type of people that it's been appealing to for the last 20, 30 years. People have been attracted by free welfare, free NHS in inverted commas, in the sense that they don't pay for it. Stupid muggins taxpayers do instead. Same would apply with the NHS. All of that. So that's the solution, basically. We need to actually try something that we've not tried for over 100 years, which is the free market. So there'll be people again that socialists, this is their programming, they've heard it from somebody else. They go, oh, well, this is like a fantasy system. It's never happened before. We've never had this. It would be like a step into the unknown. Like, to that, I just say you're ignorant of history. So if you look at Britain between, I don't know, say 1814 and 1914, that's the type of society that I'm envisaging, yeah? So people will be going, oh, are you suggesting going back to the 19th centuries and Victorian? No, because I'm not suggesting going back to like technology of the 19th century, right? What I am suggesting is the dynamism that took place during that period. So Britain went from an agrarian communities rather, you know, where you had like basically serfdom, to a modern society where, you know, Britain was the first country in the world to industrialise. Places like Manchester, it's all built with private money. There was no central planning. It was all free market. You know, we had the railways, the canals before them. Was that a product of like big government deciding like which way the railway line was going to go? You know, did technocrats decide? Did tell George Stephenson to go and design the rocket? What about the sewerage systems? You know, was that all government planning? No, it wasn't. It was all done organically from the bottom up via the free market. People casting spending votes in a daily economics election. Yeah, look at Oxford and Cambridge University. We had some fantastic education for that time with that level of technology. And what I'm saying to you is that we need to unleash that same system. A more modern example would be Hong Kong. So Hong Kong, you know, if you went back, oh, I don't know, like 70 years, dirt poor. Then we have the free market experiment. And Hong Kong quickly becomes one of the richest places on the planet prior to the CCP takeover. And that wasn't down to socialism, big government planning. That was down to the dynamism of the free market, setting people free, allowing people to decide what they want to do with their lives, whether they want to be an employee, what they want to do, whether they want to be an entrepreneur, like speculate, set up a business that may or may not work, you know? And people are rewarded. Like being an entrepreneur, it's super scary because you're risking your own money to set up a business that produces products that consumers may or may not like. And if you get it wrong, you stand to lose everything. So for me, you know, when entrepreneurs make profit, it's not a sign of them being greedy, you know, they're bad people. No, it's a sign that they're generous, outward-looking people, and they're inclined towards serving their own fellow man and women, rather than sort of thinking, well, the solution to all of our problems is that the government must tax the rich people more. People, you know, the rich get rich by serving other people, by setting up businesses that produce things of value that we voluntarily choose to buy because then we think that they're good quality rather than the government, and we also think that they're being sold at prices that we, the people, deem to be fair value for money. You know, oh, what about monopolies? What about monopolies? Well, monopolies are only a problem when you have government regulation that prevents new firms coming in to those markets. Think about banking regulations. You know, are banking regulations something to do with the free market, or are they something to do with government technocracy? It's the latter, obviously, isn't it? Right? So imagine if you have a firm in a free market, no regulations, they start to charge too much. What's going to happen? Well, new entrants are going to see a gap in the market to come in, produce something similar, charge a lower price, right? So prices naturally fall to a level that's fair. So this is what's been going wrong. Basically, we've been moving, from a free market economy closer and closer to a technocracy. Our mixed economy is heading very, very rapidly towards technocracy. And this is what this Gary's economics is like trying to push. He's trying to get you to think that a socialist technocracy is going to cure all of our problems. It's going to make you rich again. And he's basically a Trojan horse. He wants you to vote for your own slavery, to be just a peasant of big government. So that's all I want to say today. So God bless.